The galaxy's most feared fighter had promised he would break her bones one by one. 5 minutes later, he was the one being carried out on a stretcher. I've seen a lot of foolish things in my 17 cycles as a combat coordinator on Station Nexus 7. I've watched Blenthetherian nobles gamble their entire fortunes on rigged matches. I've seen Vorkwal berserkers tear through reinforced plexus steel with nothing but their claws. I've even witnessed a Matherian diplomat accidentally challenge someone to a death match because he misinterpreted our translation protocols. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for the day Ricker the Unbroken decided to fight a human. Let me give you some context, because you need it to fully appreciate the spectacular disaster that was about to unfold. Rickar wasn't just any fighter. No. This was a legend, a myth brought to life, a walking catastrophe wrapped in scales and arrogance. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, impressive even for a Crothian. Crothians evolved on a high-gravity world where everything either wanted to kill you, eat you, or preferably both. Their thick armored hide could deflect most small arms' fire. Their muscles were dense enough to bend duralloy bars. Their reflexes had been sharpened over millennia of surviving predators that made our worst nightmares look like harmless pets. And Rickar? He was the best of the best. 43 professional fights, 43 victories. 27 of those ended in first-round knockouts. The other 16? Because his opponents had the sense to surrender before he literally killed them. Station Nexus 7's galactic combat arena had become his domain, his personal stage, his throne, his shrine to the god of violence he seemed to worship. The arena itself was impressive. I'll give it that. 300 feet in diameter, encircled by energy shields capable of containing a small tactical nuke. The floor was programmable, able to replicate everything from jagged terrain to zero-gravity combat, with seating for 12,000 spectators from across the galaxy, all of them screaming, betting, drinking, and acting like civilized beings who had briefly forgotten what civilization meant. On this day, the arena was full. Word had spread that Brecker was accepting open challenges again. He did this when boredom struck, which was often. He would stand in the fighter preparation zone, all 8 feet and 600 pounds of him, daring anyone to step forward. The reward, 50,000 credits and bragging rights spanning 3 star systems. The cost, your pride, some bones, and possibly your life, though he usually stopped short of outright murder. That day, I was running the betting pools, giving me a front row view of the chaos. Ricker was holding court as always. Massive arms crossed over his chest, tail swishing in the way Crothians do when feeling particularly smug. His crimson hide was scarred white from countless battles. All 4 of his eyes scanned the crowd with open disdain. "Come on," he bellowed, his voice amplified by the arena speakers. "Is there no one left with even a shred of courage? Has this station become a haven for cowards and weaklings?" The crowd loved it. They always did. Brecker wasn't just offering violence, he was offering theater. Then she appeared. At first, I barely noticed her. She was small, around 5.5 feet tall, slim, wearing worn training gear. Her skin had that particular shade of brown that spoke to Earth's genetic diversity. Black hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. No weapons, no armor, nothing to suggest she was more than a spectator lost in the wrong section of the station. Yet she walked straight past security checkpoints, past the registration desk, heading directly for the arena floor. Said Kelvin, my Regalian assistant, his tentacles quivering in confusion. "Is that a human?" "Seems that way," I answered, already sensing a tight knot of unease forming in my chest. Humans were still newcomers to the galactic community. They had achieved faster-than-light travel only about 30 cycles earlier, making them infants by universal standards. They were small, soft, and physically delicate beings from a moderately hazardous world that few species paid much attention to. Yes, they reproduced like xanthian moss and spread through nearby systems at an impressive pace. But in raw physical capability, they ranked somewhere between planarians and geekic on the galactic scale of species you did not want to fight, that is, close to the bottom. Breer noticed her at roughly the same moment everyone else did. His eyes narrowed, and then he laughed. He laughed loudly and deeply, a booming sound that rolled through the arena like thunder. "Is this supposed to be a joke?" he shouted. "Did someone bring in entertainment? Because if this is a comedian, I want a refund." The audience followed his lead. Laughter swept through the stands. Betting terminals flared to life as spectators hurried to place wagers on how quickly the match would end. The odds were extreme. I checked the figures, 300 to 1 against the human, and that was considered generous. The woman, Rebecca Torres, according to the registration data appearing on my display, showed no reaction to the ridicule. She continued forward until she reached the edge of the arena floor, then looked up at Vreer with an expression I could only describe as mild curiosity, as though she were inspecting an unremarkable piece of furniture. I accept your challenge, she said. Her voice was soft and steady, completely disconnected from the roaring noise surrounding her. Wrecker stopped laughing. He tilted his massive head and examined her as if she were an insect that had just behaved in an unexpected way. You accept my challenge? He repeated. That is what I said. Yes, little human, Wrecker replied, his tone heavy with contempt. Do you even understand what you are doing? I will break you. I will crush every bone in your fragile body. You will be fed through a tube for the remainder of your short life. Rebecca gave a small shrug. The entry rules state that any registered sapient may issue a challenge. I am registered. I am sapient. So either fight me, or admit that your tough guy act is nothing more than empty posturing. The crowd loved it. Laughter shifted into cheers mixed with jeers. No one spoke to Vreer like that. No one. The Crothian's hide darkened to a deeper shade of red, which I had learned was a clear sign of rising anger. Fine, he snarled. Your funeral. Literally. Rebecca turned toward me. I need to place my bet. Your what? My wager. I assume I'm allowed to bet on myself. I blinked all 6 of my eyes. Technically, yes. Good. I want to put 5,000 credits on myself to win. A clear victory, not just survival. The arena fell silent. 5,000 credits at 300 to 1 odds meant she would walk away with 1.5 million credits if she won, which, of course, she would not. Still. Are you out of your mind? I asked. She smiled for the first time. And there was something about that smile that set off every warning instinct I had. It was not a friendly smile. It was not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that meant he knew something you didn't. Just process the bet, please. I did. What else could I do? The arena prep took another 10 minutes. Medical teams took their positions. The shield generators powered up with a high-pitched whine. The floor shifted to standard combat mode, a flat, non-slip surface with impact dampening zones along the edges. Rebecca stepped onto the arena floor, wearing the same worn training gear she had arrived in. Wrecker entered from the opposite side, and the crowd erupted in noise. He raised his arms, soaking in the cheers, his massive frame casting a shadow that seemed to engulf the small human woman completely. I glanced at the betting totals one more time. 98% of the money was on Vreer. The remaining 2% was from humans who either had too much loyalty or too little sense. The referee, a Kaldorian with extensive cybernetic enhancements, raised his hand. Fighters ready? Vreer cracked his knuckles, each pop sounding like a gunshot. Ready to crush, he said. Rebecca rolled her shoulders and bounced lightly on her toes. Ready. I leaned forward in my coordinator booth, forgetting my data pad. This could be either the shortest fight in arena history or the most fascinating. The referee's hand dropped. Fight. He raised one hand again before either fighter could move. Standard rules apply. Fight continues until knockout, submission, or medical intervention. Killing blows are forbidden and will result in immediate disqualification and criminal charges. Deliberate maiming will incur fines. Do both fighters understand? Yes. Yes, Vreer said dismissively, his eyes never leaving Rebecca. His expression was a mix of amusement and insult. Understood, Rebecca replied. The referee nodded and stepped back to the edge of the arena, but he did not start the fight immediately. There was always this tense pause before the violence began, when fighters sized each other up. Some used it to plan, others to intimidate. Vicker chose intimidation. He began to circle Rebecca slowly, his massive feet thudding against the arena floor with each step. The sound echoed like a war drum. You know what I'll enjoy most, little human? The sound, that wonderful crunch when your ribs collapse. The pop when your joints break. The wet squelch when. Are you actually trying to scare me? Rebecca interrupted. Or are you just really bad at flirting? Because honestly, I can't tell. The crowd erupted in laughter. Even I had to stifle a chuckle, and I was supposed to be professional. Vreer's hide darkened. You dare mock me? I mean, you're making it pretty easy, she said, tilting her head and studying him with mild interest. Let me guess, you're going to tell me about all the opponents you've destroyed. Then flex, roar, maybe pound your chest a few times. Am I close? The Crothian warrior stepped closer, looming over her. At 8 feet tall, he stood nearly 3 feet taller than Rebecca. His shadow fell fully over her. I have defeated warriors twice your size without effort. I have forced champions to beg for mercy. What do you believe you will achieve here, human? What illusion led you into my arena? Rebecca yawned, an actual yawn. Oh, sorry. Were you still speaking? Now, let me explain something about humans and why the galactic community generally viewed them as, let's say, unimpressive in combat. The reason was biology and planetary conditions. Most species that reached space travel came from worlds that were brutal, high gravity, toxic air, massive predators, and extreme environments. Those conditions shaped them into natural weapons. Crothians originated on a planet with 1.88 times standard gravity. Borals evolved beside creatures capable of breathing fire. Mothers developed on a world where the climate could shift from frozen wasteland to boiling desert within hours. Earth was classified as a Category 4 death world. That sounds impressive until you realize the scale goes to Category 10. Its gravity was slightly above average, its predators moderately dangerous, and its weather active but not remarkable. Humans evolved as persistence hunters and tool users, making them intelligent and adaptable, but not especially strong, fast, or resilient by galactic standards. The average human could lift roughly their own body weight. The average Crothian could lift 5 times that. Humans had no natural armor, no claws, no venom, no redundant organs. They were soft, fragile, and vulnerable to almost everything. A single solid punch from a Crothian could collapse a human skull. Because of this, everyone assumed the fight would last about 15 seconds. Wrecker clearly believed the same. He stopped circling and positioned himself directly in front of Rebecca, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. This is how it will happen, human. I will charge. You will try to dodge, because that is what prey does, but you will be too slow. I will seize you, lift you, and slam you into the ground hard enough to drive the air from your weak lungs. Then, while you struggle and whimper, I will lift you again and repeat it until you understand your place in the natural order. Huh? Rebecca said. That's a lot of steps. Have you considered just being good at fighting instead? Frecker's roar echoed through the arena, a raw sound filled with fury, hunger, and intent. His tail snapped behind him, claws extending from his fingers, each 6 inches long and sharpened at the molecular level. The crowd erupted, thousands of voices shouting in expectation. Rebecca did not move. Her arms rested loosely at her sides, her expression calm and unchanged. Inside his mind, Breer was already imagining his victory celebration. One move would end it all, one charge, one grab, one slam. The human would collapse like paper. The crowd would roar his name. He would collect his appearance fee, plus any extra winnings from the betting pools. Perhaps he would even show a shred of mercy, breaking just enough bones to remind her not to challenge someone stronger. 15 seconds, he calculated. Maybe 20 if she was lucky. The referee raised his hand again. Fighters, are you ready? Wrecker lowered into a combat stance, his massive body coiled like a spring. Every muscle tensed, primed to launch forward with brutal force. Ready. Rebecca shifted slightly, her feet shoulder-width apart, knees barely bent. She looked calm. Too calm, as if she were waiting for a ride rather than about to face several hundred pounds of enraged Crothian strength. Ready? The crowd erupted into a frenzy. People in the stands seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Betting terminals flashed as last-minute wagers poured in. Somehow, the odds against Rebecca had worsened, now 400 to 1. The referee's hand dropped. Fight! Ricker lunged forward with a speed that defied his size. The arena floor cracked under the force of his push-off. His arms shot forward, claws glinting under the arena lights, reaching for the small human woman who had dared to insult him. Rebecca did not flinch. For a heartbeat, everyone watching thought she had resigned herself, accepting the consequences of her audacity. Then, in the final instant, she moved. It was subtle, a tiny rotation of her hips, a small sidestep, a slight duck of her head, but it was enough. Breer's massive frame surged past her, his claws slicing through the air where she had been only moments before. His momentum carried him forward, unable to stop, and he crashed onto the arena floor with a sound like a minor explosion. The crowd collectively gasped. Rebecca turned to watch him scramble to his feet, that familiar, dangerous smile appearing again. "Oops," she said softly. "Did you trip?" Breer's roar of rage could probably be heard across 3 decks. I realized, then, that this was going to get interesting. He pushed himself up from the arena floor, dark crimson patches spreading across his shoulders and neck. In Crothian physiology, that color indicated one thing: embarrassment mixed with fury, a dangerous combination. "Lucky," he snarled, the word spat out like a curse. "Lucky, indeed." Rebecca said nothing. She simply stood, hands relaxed at her sides, weight evenly balanced, waiting. The Crothian charged again, this time with more caution. Rather than committing to a grab, he swung a heavy right hook at her head. The punch came fast, a blur of scaled flesh and extended claws that would have been fatal to a lesser being. The air whistled as his fist cut through it. Rebecca leaned back, and the punch passed so close that her ponytail swayed from the displaced air. Before Breer could retract his arm, she stepped inside his guard and drove 3 sharp, precise jabs into his ribs. Then she retreated, dancing out of range before he could counter. Rhaegar looked down, bewildered. The punches had landed, he had felt them, yet they hadn't caused real pain. Not really. Like being hit by a child, he muttered. What is this human thinking? Stand still, Briar roared, advancing with more caution. No, I don't think I will, Rebecca replied, circling to his left. The crowd's cheers for Briar persisted, but now there were new sounds, uncertainty, confusion, even scattered laughter that wasn't entirely at Rebecca's expense. The betting terminals showed a subtle but noticeable rise in people hedging their bets, placing small amounts on the human just in case. Ricker tried a combination this time, a left jab, a right cross, followed by a sweeping kick aimed to shatter Rebecca's legs if it landed. He moved faster than most Crothians, his strikes sharpened by years of professional combat. Each blow carried enough force to dent armor. Rebecca sidestepped the jab and ducked under the cross so low her knee nearly touched the ground. The kick whooshed above her head. Using the momentum, Briar spun, but Rebecca quickly popped back up and struck him again, targeting the kidney area, if Crothians even had kidneys. Four quick punches landed almost on the exact same spot. Wrecker stumbled, more from surprise than pain. He spun around, tail whipping in a move meant to catch opponents off guard. Rebecca jumped over it, really jumped, tucking her legs like skipping rope, landing in a crouch 3 feet away. How are you doing that? Regard demanded, his breathing heavier, not from exertion, but frustration. How are you moving so fast? I'm not moving fast, Rebecca said, barely breathing hard at all. You're just moving predictably. That seemed to push Briar over the edge. He abandoned strategy completely and went full berserker, charging forward with a storm of strikes. His arms blurred with claws and scales, attacking high, low, and middle in combinations that would overwhelm almost anyone through sheer ferocity. The arena reverberated with the sound of his strikes slicing through the air. Rebecca flowed through the assault like water around rocks. She bobbed, weaved, slipped, and ducked. Every strike missed by inches, or less. Each time Brecker overextended, momentum carrying him too far, she was there, a jab to the throat, a hook to the floating ribs, a sharp cross to the solar plexus. The hit seemed minor individually, but she kept hitting the same points repeatedly. The crowd fell silent, watching in stunned awe. The only sounds were the missed strikes of Vicar, the sharp snaps of Rebecca's knuckles, and the increasingly labored breathing of the Crothian warrior. I checked my datapad, 3 minutes had passed. 3 minutes, and Wrecker hadn't landed a single clean hit. Kelvin leaned over my shoulder, tentacles quivering nervously. This shouldn't be possible. The speed difference alone. I know, I muttered. And the strength ratio. I know. Then how is she? I have no idea. Down in the arena, Briar began to realize he had a serious problem. His attacks grew sloppier, fueled by frustration rather than skill. He was used to overpowering opponents quickly, ending fights before they began. But Rebecca refused to be overwhelmed, refused to be intimidated, refused to do anything except keep moving, keep striking, and make him look foolish. Briar switched tactics. If precision failed, he would try area of effect. He planted his feet, drew back his massive fist, and slammed it into the arena floor with all his strength. The impact cracked the reinforced surface, spiderweb fractures spreading outward. The shockwave aimed to knock Rebecca down, stun her, finally open an opportunity. Rebecca had already jumped back. She landed in a 3-point stance, perfectly balanced, as debris and dust settled around her. Nice try, she said. Want to take a break? You look tired. I'm not tired, Briar bellowed, though his heaving chest suggested otherwise. I'm just getting started. He charged again, roaring, arms spread wide to block her dodges. This time, he aimed to corner her against the arena wall, no escape. Rebecca ran straight at him. The crowd gasped, surely she had finally made a mistake. But she didn't. She dropped into a slide, low and fast across the smooth floor, passing between Briar's legs so close her shoulder brushed his ankle. As she slid past, she reached up and punched him at the tailbase, a Crothian nerve cluster particularly sensitive to pain. Bricker howled in shock and pain. His momentum carried him forward, and he struggled to stop or turn. The floor, slick with dust from his earlier attacks, betrayed him. He slammed into the arena wall, not a mere bump, but a full-force collision of a 600-pound Crothian at full sprint. The energy barrier flared bright blue, absorbing the impact and preventing him from breaking through, yet the crash was still devastating. Bricker bounced off the wall, landing on his back. His eyes glazed, limbs twitching. The referee moved forward, hand raised, ready to call a knockout, but Bricker groaned and rolled onto his side. He wasn't out. Dazed? Yes. Humiliated? Absolutely. But not defeated. He pushed himself up onto hands and knees, shaking his head to clear it. 10 feet away, Rebecca stood calmly, hands on her hips. I have to ask, she said casually. Do you actually practice, or just rely on being big and scary? Bricker didn't answer with words. A guttural roar of pure fury rose from deep in his chest. He wobbled to his feet, eyes locked on Rebecca with an intensity that could terrify most beings. The crowd erupted. Half chanted Bricker's name, urging him to crush this human upstart. The other half screamed for Rebecca, mesmerized by the impossible spectacle, a human holding her own against a Crosthean champion. I glanced at the fight clock. 5 minutes down. Bricker, bleeding from a cut above his eye ridge, was breathing heavily, frustrated. Rebecca, meanwhile, looked as if she had just finished a light warm-up. The betting odds were swinging, 300 to 1, 200 to 1, 150. People were beginning to realize they might have underestimated the human. Bricker wiped the blood from his face and assumed a proper fighting stance for the first time in the match. No more showboating. No more assumptions. This is a real fight now. Rebecca's smile widened. There we go, she said. I was wondering when you'd start taking this seriously. Bricker, experienced and seasoned, knew it was time to adapt. Brute strength, intimidation, and speed alone hadn't worked. He fell back on the fundamentals that had made him a champion: technique, reach, and strategic positioning. He began working his jab, not wild haymakers, but controlled, measured strikes using his superior arm length to keep Rebecca at bay. Each jab extended nearly 4 feet from his shoulder, a barrier of scaled fist and razor-sharp claws. He added low kicks aimed at her legs, trying to limit her mobility and negate her speed advantage. For the first time, it seemed Bricker had found an answer. Rebecca was forced to circle backward, searching for openings that weren't coming as easily. The crowd roared in approval. This was more like it, the Bricker they knew, finally learning. Are we? Rebecca said, her tone approving rather than mocking. Bricker ignored her, eyes tracking every subtle movement she made. He threw another jab, then another, establishing a rhythm. When Rebecca tried to slip inside, he countered with a short elbow strike, forcing her to reset. But Rebecca adapted, too. Instead of avoiding the jabs entirely, she began deflecting them. A subtle parry here, a redirect there, sending his strikes slightly off target. Step by step, she moved closer, inching into his dangerous zone. Bricker threw a straight right, putting full power behind it. Rebecca slapped it aside with her left hand and stepped in. Before he could retract, she was inside his guard, too close for him to leverage his reach. She drove an uppercut into his ribs, a hook to his liver, and another uppercut under the chin. Fast, precise, brutal, each strike flowed into the next like a choreographed sequence of violence. Bricker's head snapped back. Vision blurred. And in that instant, something clicked? A thought so alien it froze him, he might lose. Bricker, undefeated in 43 professional bouts, feared across 3 star systems, might actually lose to a human. Rebecca didn't allow him a moment to dwell. She pressed forward relentlessly, striking in combinations he couldn't predict or counter. Every attempt to create distance or use his strength advantage was thwarted. Bricker's breathing grew labored. His muscles burned under the constant motion. Crostheans had great stamina, but never like this: constant defense, constant adjustment. Rebecca, meanwhile, remained steady. Sweat darkened her training gear, but her breath was controlled. Her movements hadn't slowed, if anything, they were faster. How, are you not tired? Bricker gasped. Cardio, Rebecca replied, ducking under a hook. You should try it sometime. She drove a liver shot that lit up his left side with pain. Instinctively, his arm dropped to protect the injury. Rebecca immediately switched targets, hitting him with a cross to the snout. Blood erupted from his nostrils, staining his chest crimson. The arena erupted. Screams and chants formed a deafening wall of noise. Half the crowd cheered Rebecca. Betting terminals went haywire, odds swinging wildly. Bricker backed up, trying to breathe, to create space. His legs and arms felt heavy. Every part of him screamed to stop, but pride wouldn't allow it. Bricker, the unbroken, would not surrender. He lunged forward in desperation, unleashing one final combination: right cross, left hook, right uppercut, spinning back fist, each strike bone-crushing, capable of ending the fight. Rebecca dodged the cross by a fraction, ducked under the hook, swayed back from the uppercut, and then caught the spinning back fist. Bricker's eyes widened in shock. Her hands, small but firm, trapped his massive wrist. For a frozen moment, they were locked. Then Rebecca twisted, using Bricker's own force to hurl him. A human threw a Crosthean. He crashed onto his back, air expelled from his lungs, stars exploding in his vision. He tried to rise, arms and legs refusing to cooperate. Pride demanded he continue, but his body had reached its limit. Rebecca stood over him, barely winded, fists raised. "Stay down," she said, her voice for the first time genuine. "You fought well. There's no shame in stopping. Bricker couldn't hear her. Darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. Through sheer will, he managed to push one hand under himself. Trembling, he tried to rise. The crowd held its collective breath. Bricker, the unbroken, refused to quit. Even if it killed him, he would stand again. He refused to stop fighting. Rebecca's fist came down one final time. Wrecker forced himself up onto his knees, every muscle in his body screaming in resistance. Blood dripped from his snout onto the arena floor, each drop forming small crimson pools that reflected the lights above. His vision blurred, split, then slowly pulled itself back into something close to focus. Rebecca had stepped back, giving him space to stand. A mistake, he thought through the fog of pain and fatigue. A mistake he could use. He had one opportunity left. One last gamble. Among Crothians, there was a technique rarely employed because of the immense energy it consumed, known as the devastation rush. It was a berserker-style assault that poured every remaining ounce of strength into a 5-second burst of overwhelming force. Fighters who attempted it either won decisively or collapsed the moment it ended. There was no in-between. Wrecker drew in a deep breath, tasting his own blood. His vision sharpened as combat-driven adrenaline surged through him. Every sound in the arena became clear. He could pick out individual voices in the crowd. He could hear Rebecca's calm, steady breathing. He could hear his own heart's pounding against his ribs like war drums. Then he launched forward. The devastation rush delivered exactly what its name implied. Wrecker turned into a storm of claws, fists, elbows, knees, and tail strikes. He attacked from every direction at once, his body moving with a speed and aggression that seemed impossible for something so large and so drained. The air itself appeared to crack under the force of his blows. Rebecca's eyes widened. This was different. This was a serious threat. She blocked a claw, slipped past a knee, deflected an elbow, but the attacks kept coming, too many and too fast. One clawed hand scraped her shoulder, ripping through her training gear and drawing the first blood. A tail strike hit her hip, knocking her off balance. A punch she barely redirected still carried enough power to numb her forearm. The crowd erupted. This was it. This was the Vreer, the unstoppable force, the living weapon. Wrecker pushed harder and faster, pouring everything he had left into the final assault. His vision began to narrow again, but it no longer mattered. He only needed one clean hit. Just one. A solid connection to that vulnerable human skull, and it would be over. He swung a massive right-handed strike, driving every last fragment of strength into the blow. The punch struck like a meteor, fast, devastating, and fully committed. Rebecca didn't step back or dodge. She dropped straight into a low squat so quickly that Brecker's strike sailed over her head. His forward momentum carried him off balance, overextended, and completely exposed. Rebecca sprang upward like a coiled spring, channeling her full weight and timing perfectly. Her fist connected with Vreer's chin with surgical precision. The impact reverberated through the arena like a gunshot. Wrecker's head snapped back, his 4 eyes rolled upward, and his legs gave out. He was unconscious before hitting the floor. The fall seemed almost slow motion, 600 pounds of alien warrior tipping backward, arms and tail limp, crashing onto the arena floor with a boom that shook the observation booth. The referee dashed in, arms waving frantically. Knockout! Knockout! Winner by knockout, Rebecca Torres! The crowd erupted. The roar was so intense that the station's structural alarms briefly triggered. Half the audience cheered in disbelief, the other half either screamed in joy or stared in stunned silence at what they had just witnessed. Rebecca stood over Vreer's unconscious form, breathing heavily, fist still raised. She lowered it slowly, rolled her shoulders, and walked calmly to her corner as though finishing a routine sparring session. Medical teams flooded the arena, scanners and emergency equipment appearing instantly. Vreer, meanwhile, remained out cold. When consciousness returned, the first thing he felt was pain, dull, throbbing, and coursing through his entire body. His head felt like a percussion instrument, his ribs ached, his jaw throbbed, and even parts of him he didn't know could hurt were screaming for attention. The second thing he noticed was the harsh, sterile light stabbing into his eyes as he tried to open them. The third was a voice, familiar, amused, barely containing laughter. "Oh, good. You're awake. Welcome back to the land of the conscious champion." Vreer cracked his eyes open. He was in the medical bay, lying on a reinforced bed designed for large species, with monitoring devices on his chest and head. And 4 drips supplied a substance that numbed some pain. Ian Medic stood beside him, her compound eyes glinting with restrained amusement. Her manipulator arms updated a data pad, but she kept glancing at Vreer like he was the funniest thing she had ever seen. Vreer's mouth was dry, tongue thick and clumsy. He winced and managed a croaked question, "Who won?" The medic lost it. She had tried to stay professional, but laughter poured out like water from a broken dam. She had to set down the datapad, and soon others in the bay chuckled as well. "Oh, that's perfect," she gasped between giggles. "Absolutely perfect. You seriously don't remember?" Seeing his confusion, the medic tapped her datapad, projecting a hollow screen above his bed. "Maybe this will help," she said, fighting another wave of laughter. The screen replayed the arena, his final desperate attack, Rebecca dropping low, the uppercut that ended it, and his collapse like a crumbling building. It finished with Rebecca standing victorious over him. Vreer stared at the frozen image, his foggy brain struggling to process what had happened. "I lost," he said slowly, testing the words. "I lost to a human." "You did indeed," the medic confirmed, her voice kind despite lingering amusement. "Quite spectacularly, I might add. The fight's already trending across 6 systems. You're famous, just not in the way you probably hoped." Ryadakar closed his eyes. He wanted to feel anger, humiliation, defeat, but mostly, he felt exhausted and strangely curious. "Where is she?" he asked. "Last I saw," the medic said, pointing to another hollow screen displaying the arena's public areas, "she's collecting her winnings. 1.5 million credits. Apparently, she bet on herself." The screen showed Rebecca at the payment terminal, surrounded by cheering humans and other species who had apparently profited by betting on the impossible. She smiled, shook hands, and looked completely unbothered by the fact she had just knocked out one of the galaxy's most feared fighters. "How?" Breer muttered to himself, staring at the display. "How did she do that?" The medic brought up another screen, this one showing Rebecca's registration file. Her bio listed her as a former military combatives instructor from Earth, specialized in mixed martial arts, along with training in a dozen other human fighting styles, boxing, Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, and more he couldn't even pronounce. Scrolling through the details, he noticed that, by Earth standards, she was considered quite average for her field. "Average," Greer repeated numbly. Humans, it seemed, might be physically weaker than most species. But they had been fighting each other for their entire history. They had honed combat into an art, turning aggression and creativity into techniques that didn't rely on raw strength. The medic looked at him with something close to sympathy. "You weren't defeated by superior genetics, Viga. You were defeated by superior skill." Wrecker stared at the ceiling, absorbing the truth. Part of his ego screamed in protest, but another, quieter part of him felt something he hadn't in years: respect. "I want a rematch," he said suddenly. The medic laughed. "Not for at least 3 months. You've got 2 cracked ribs, a concussion, a fractured jaw, and enough bruising to paint a small ship. You're going to be here a while, champion." Wrecker managed a weak smile, wincing in pain. 3 months. Then tell her. Tell the human. 3 months, and we fight again. "Oh, this I have to see," the medic said, shaking her head with amusement. "The galaxy is going to lose its mind." On the hollow screen, Rebecca was being interviewed by a sports reporter. The audio was muted, but her body language said it all: confident, calm, professional. When the reporter apparently asked if she would fight Breer again, she simply shrugged and smiled. Watching her, Breer realized something he should have known from the start: humans weren't weak. They were underestimated, and that, he now understood, was exactly how they liked it. He closed his eyes, letting the painkillers pull him toward sleep. His last coherent thoughts were unexpectedly optimistic: next time would be different. Next time he'd be ready. Next time he'd know what he was facing. Next time. Even through the haze of medication and exhaustion, a small voice whispered a truth he wasn't fully ready to accept: next time, he would probably lose again. Surprisingly, that thought didn't bother him as much as it should have.